The nation's top health officials testifying remotely today before the Senate on reopening the economy. Dr. Anthony Fauci issuing a warning about states restarting their economies too soon.
That if some areas, cities, states, or what have you, jump over those various checkpoints and prematurely open up without having the capability of being able to respond effectively and efficiently, my concern is that we will start to see little spikes that might turn into outbreaks.
And there was this contentious moment between Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci. Take a look.
I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision.
I have never made myself out to be the end all and only voice in this. I'm a scientist, a physician, and a public health official. I give advice according to the best scientific evidence. There are a number of other people who come into that and give advice that are more related to the things that you spoke about the need to get the country back open again and economically. I don't give advice about economic things. I don't give advice about anything other than public health.
All right, Greg, what did you take away from this hearing today?
Well, I always say, I've said this before, if you are pointing fingers, there's an entrance fee. You have to ask, you have to say, how would you have done this differently? But you cannot use 20/20 hindsight. We do know that Trump relied on experts, and experts were wrong on masks, tests, ventilators, and especially the experts that were informing Cuomo, rest homes. So if you believe that you would have done better, the big question, if you knew something, why did you hold out on us? All you smarty pants people in the media, why did you have this inside info on fighting a virus and held it back for us? And it's amazing how accurate pundits and politicians are when they're looking backward. Like the standard for testing, tell us exactly what the standard for testing is, considering experts don't even know what that is because they haven't dealt with it before. So the thing is, you can't tell what a good job is when it's the first job. We know it could always be better, but you don't know how. So do not trust the media on this, but do not fault people, whether it is Fauci, whether it is Trump, even whether it is Cuomo, who give advice or take a risk and turn out to be wrong, because everybody's going to be wrong on this, no matter what.
And Jesse, one thing I did notice today in the hearing is that the Democrats were very frustrated at the government, at the Trump administration in particular. And their solutions, though, seem to be that we need more government.
Yeah, because government's done so well over the last so many years. To Greg's point about the Democrats' strategy, it's a great point because we still don't know what the Democrat strategy is, because all they say is Trump is either doing things too slowly or he's doing things too quickly. So all it is just a complaint. I mean, Petraeus had the surge strategy. Trump had the tariff strategy with China. There is no Democrat strategy on this. It's whining. That's all it is. So I watched this entire hearing, and it's incredibly frustrating because they've set these traps with tests. Now, we would have gotten a test sooner if China hadn't destroyed the virus samples in the lab. If they had just shared it with the rest of the world, we could have gotten the test a lot quicker. But now here's what they do with testing. Now that we've tested more people than all the other countries in the world combined, they say, okay, well, the testing rate isn't good enough. Permission to make a sports analogy, Dana. This is like when a quarterback goes 9 for 10 for 100 yards. And the opposing quarterback goes 39 for 50 for 400 yards. The Democrats think the quarterback that went 9 for 10 is better because he had a better completion percentage. No, anybody with a brain will take the quarterback that had 39 completions for 400 yards. So don't fall into that trap. I do agree, though, testing needs to get better. And I was disappointed with the CDC director, this guy Redfield. I don't get a good feeling about him. They had the lab contamination early. He doesn't inspire confidence. He's a poor communicator. He's not clear. He doesn't look charged up. Something about this guy I don't like. I can't put my finger on it, But the fact that he hasn't been out in front and center on this whole thing from the beginning as the CDC director tells you a lot.
But he has been. I mean, like the White House has been having him do a lot of talk radio all across the nation because they think he's been great. But I take your point. And of course, it wasn't easy, Juan, to hear everybody during the remote. There was the dog that was barking and also Lamar Alexander's cute dog that was sitting behind him. What did you take away from the hearing?
Dogs.
Yeah. Well, I find that entertaining because I think it's very real, and you get the sense that these are human beings. We see them in the official setting of a Senate hearing room, and you can think, oh, it's just some guy in a suit. In response to what Jesse was saying, by the way, I was taken by the idea that you had Republicans like Lamar Alexander and Mitt Romney saying, hey, the testing has just not been sufficient and nothing to celebrate, and especially if we're looking towards reopening schools in the fall, we don't have that in place. Fauci was very clear about that. We don't have any kind of regimen or testing or any kind of way that we could assure the chancellor of the University of Tennessee, for example, I think that's what they were talking about with Senator Alexander, that you can open school in the fall, because right now it just doesn't seem that that's a reasonable goal to have. The other thing I would say is, in terms of what Fauci said, again, I don't think this is Republican or Democrat. I think Fauci just said with the potential for spikes out across our country, not just in the big cities, there's just too much potential for death and more suffering and more people getting sick. And it was very clear to me that he was trying to not politicize it, not to get into a back and forth with Rand Paul, but to say he was speaking as a scientist and that people should listen.
Yeah. Katie, on the school thing, the chairman did go back to Fauci and say, let's clarify, and Fauci said different solutions for different places, but he also said something that people might take some hope from, and that was that when pressed by Senator Romney, do you really think it's realistic to get a vaccine within a year or two? Fauci said, absolutely, that is possible.
Yeah, and I thought what Rand Paul said about keeping kids out of school for a year and the consequences of that, especially if they're lower income kids, there would be severe consequences for that. And also, Dr. Fauci said that the vast majority of people who get this disease recover. And I think there needs to be more focus on the recovery numbers in addition to the new cases and the continuation of the flattening the curve. And in the end, there are going to be consequences on both sides of this, no matter what decision they make. If you keep it locked down, there'll be severe consequences in so many different sectors for that. Yeah. If you open it back up, yes, there will be more cases, but the deal was never to have zero cases. The deal was to get the hospitals ready to deal with this.
Yeah, there's no perfect decision to be made, indeed.